No.
You've got to move your card if you don't, though, because when you speak, it comes up with the name.
So the card's the white thing on the side of it.
Oh, yeah, so you don't want to be...
Welcome to the Lifestyle and Community Committee meeting, part of the 802nd round. Councillors, we do have some apologies to note. If I could have someone note the apologies of Councillor Caldwell, moved Councillor Tozer, seconded Councillor Lacastra. All those in favour, all those against, that is carried. I've also received the apologies of Councillor Gates. Would someone like to move that those apologies be noted? Councillor O'Neill, seconded Councillor Tozer. Councillors, I'll similarly put that to a vote. All those in favour? All those against, that is carried. Councillors, we have 9 items, but also a few general business items to deal with, mopping up some urgent business ahead of budget. We have, right at the top, of course, confirmation of minutes and conflict of interest declarations. Councillors, just on declarations, were there any that were going to be made today? No? Okay, so we will not deal with item 2. Item 3 is starred. Item 4 is starred. I'm happy to star item 5. Item 7 is starred. Councillors, did you have any questions pertaining... Sorry, we carried your apologies, Councillor Gates. Thought you had an appointment that you... Oh. So if we could just note in the minutes that Councillor Gates arrived at 1 past 1. No, it's all right. That's my mistake, sorry. I am. Oh, I'd understood that because of the appointment that you wouldn't be here. Sorry. I'm with you. So, councillors, presently we would then propose to deal with item 1, item 3, item 4, item 5, item 5, item 7 as starred items. There's also item 8 and item 9. Were there any questions pertaining to 8? So we do have a question, and when we arrive at that, councillors, we will have to move into closed and make a specific reference as to the reasons for that. And we will deal separately with item 9, and then we've got a few general business items. Councillor Tozer, were you happy to move the start items? Do I have a seconder? Councillor O'Neill. So 1, 3, 4, 5, 7. Councillors, all those in favour? All those against? That's carried. All right, councillors. For item 6, we need to move into close so that I can just provide some explanation about the confidentiality of the attachment on that. Yes. So it's merely for, it's a process issue, and I'll ultimately be happy to move the item, but councillors, would someone like to second that we go into close to deal with... Yep. And it's certainly not the appointment or dismissal of the Chief Executive Officer, Industrial Relation Matters or what have you. It's for the reason that you should have on hand. Okay, so too soon. Councillors, all those in favour? All those against? Carried. All right. non-confidential. Okay, moved by Councillor Tozer, seconded by Councillor O'Neill. Councillors, so I'll put that to a vote. All those in favour? All those against? That is carried. So we're back in open session. If we can turn streaming on. Great. Great, so we've taken for those tuning in closed session, we've considered item 6 on the agenda, which deals with the Queensland Rail Positive Partnerships Program. We have 2 attachments that are presently confidential, but committee has taken the step of recommending to council that those attachments, as amended, be deemed non-confidential documents. Councillors, long story short, I think we all agree that graffiti is a blight on our city, and the worst graffiti is the graffiti that's seen by the most number of people, because then you actually end up with the higher social cost. One of the busiest parts of our city is our public transport corridor, and in particular our heavy rail corridor. What the Mayoral Safer Suburbs identified, following some representations I made on behalf of my community, is that heavy rail infrastructure is not being maintained to the same high standards that we apply to our own city-controlled infrastructure. And as a consequence, there's a risk of graffiti along the heavy rail corridor promoting graffiti in the nearby residential area and throughout the nearby local road network. By the state government getting on top of their problem, we can lower some of the costs incurred in dealing with the problem. What I'm particularly excited about with our suggestion here is that council will support a series of sites along the heavy rail corridor that the state government ought to step up and better maintain, but most importantly, deliver public art. And I think there can be nothing better than visitors to our city, or even commuters returning home, arriving through the Gold Coast and being presented with artwork, rather than a dystopian 1980s Detroit nightmare. Because, you know, we aspire for more in our city. It's like RoboCop. It isn't. But that's a consequence of inaction, Councillor Tozer. So I think it's sensible, and it allows to lobby our local state members as well to get some of these projects up. Councillor Tozer, you've seconded that. Councillors, any speakers against? No, I'll put that motion. All those in favour? All those against? That's carried. Great, thank you, councillors. Councillors, we now need to move into closed session to deal with item 8 and item 9. Director, I understand that we have got some amended wording for the reason for coming into close. Has that been provided to our minute secretary? Okay. And are you satisfied with what's listed on the screen? Yep, Director?
Yes.
Based on the legal advice we've received? Okay. Councillor Gates, you happy to move that we're going to close for that reason? Do I have a seconder? Councillor Tozer. Councillors, all those in favour? All those against? If we can make doubly sure that the streaming is off, please, just because of the sensitive nature of this item. open. Can turn streaming on. Great. All right, councillors. We've dealt with 2 items in close. Of course, we can't put that to a vote formally in close, so we've returned to open for this purpose. Item 8 was moved by Councillor O'Neill, seconded by Councillor Tozer. Councillors, any speakers against the item? No. Councillor O'Neill, noting that it is confidential item, is there anything you'd like to say in open as the mover?
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to say that I appreciate that we're taking a targeted approach to this. I think it's required, and I'm quite happy to support the recommendation.
Great. Councillors, any speakers against? No, that being the case, I'm happy to put that to a vote. All those in favour? All those against? That is carried. Moving to item 9, which again is a confidential item. Councillor Castro, noting that it's closed, but also that we've provided some detail there in open, is there anything you'd like to share as the mover of the motion?
No, only just to say, I just wanted to say that this will be a great project if we can get this happening, and I would like to thank the committee for their support to refer this for budget deliberations this year to give it some serious discussion, and so really appreciate your support in that to get it on the table and talk about something that could be wonderful for the city.
Yep. And I'll just add that I've had engagement with the Friends of the Regional Botanic Gardens for some time, as I have city officers in different professional capacities, and I just want to laud how professional and in such good faith the community has lobbied to get this project kicking along. Quite often I think it's very easy for a group that's passionate about something to go full bore if they don't get it right away, yet quietly, constructively and using an evidence-based approach, I think there's been a lot of good advocacy from councillors, from officers and the community, and I thought I'd just pull that out and talk to it, specifically to address point 4, which acknowledges the petition that has been put together on this topic. Councillor Gates.
Could I just add that I think there is absolutely strong support for the position that we've reached today, and primarily because of the magnificent job that's been done at the Botanic Gardens. Every time that I visit, it's more magnificent. So it's a fabulous asset for our city, and I think, we need to get people there a little more often to experience it.
And we'll put the state government on notice, because they've got a role to play on bringing people through the front door too. Councillors, I'll put that to a vote. All those in favour? All those against? That is carried. All right, councillors, just a few general business items. We've got a collection here, and we've got including from the Mayor. So, first one is as follows. This is from me, by the way. That corporate communication, capital C, design a standardised interpretive plaque. No, I'm not going where you think I might be going. Plaque for installation alongside Lone Pines, capital L, capital P. Yep. Planted in city open spaces and reserves. And if I've got a seconder, I'm happy to explain why that's important. Seconded, Councillor Tozer. So we'll fix those. We'll fix those while we debate. Look, long story short, councillors, as you know, Lone Pine, Lone, L-O-N-E. Lone Pines are one of the most, let's call them sacred Anzac institutions because of the meaning they have, in schools, at war memorials and in places in our community. It's one of the most common ways you may be confronted with the Anzac tradition. Council has resolved to support the continual planting or availability of lone pines throughout our city. I'm happy to say, and I think Councillor Tozer will agree, the one at Elsie Laver Park is thriving. Yep, well, at the very least, the lone pine at Lone Pine Park in Ravenna has been thriving for the last few years. But what's really interesting, councillors, is that there is no standardised plaque that we can, as divisional councillors, have put alongside the lone pine so that people understand what it is that they're looking at. I've moved this motion because amongst RSL clubs nationally, there is a very large plaque concerning lone pines that various RSL clubs would like installed, and they're not necessarily in keeping with the aesthetic that we've established in our own local parks. So the purpose of this general business item is to ask corporate communication to develop a fitting, appropriately scaled interpretive plaque that we can, as divisional councillors, optionally put alongside those lone pines which are planted in memory of our veterans, rather than a non-standardised, perhaps not an ADF approved plaque that we may have requests to support. Yeah, so I'm sure I would never want to diminish the sacrifice that was ever made, so I'm happy to keep it modest. Well, let's just say design and appropriate. Yeah. And it's essentially to provide some structure and consistency in the way that these trees are located. And if we ever receive an unsolicited proposal for plaques and memorabilia to be put into parks, that we've got a standard reference that can be used. That's just to clean things up. Yeah. Sure, and I suppose, like, I've got one next to the single lone pine that's in my division. I've got a plaque. In fact, that's the only reason why I knew it was a lone pine, because it had been allowed to fall over in neglect. And it's because I saw the plaque that I was able to get the tree sort of fixed and have the park renamed and the tree supported. So it was because of the plaque. So I see value in the plaque. I didn't know that we've got a general disposition to not having plaques. If that's in a policy, I don't know. But what I'm finding is that I'm getting the requests anyway, in my own experience. And if you're not happy, well, I'm not going to take any offence if there's no support for it. But if we are to receive the requests that I know at least I'm receiving, it would be better for the city to do the work of at least designing the plaque, rather than for us to potentially say no to a much larger plaque because it doesn't fit within our expectations for signage in our areas.
Would you see this as removing the ability for anything other than the standardised plaque to be attached to the lone pine? Because I know that my RSL is currently working on a project regarding a lone pine that they planted several years ago, but it came ultimately with a family story. It was gifted to the RSL and it comes with a story, and they're actually interested in doing a plaque project with the support of the federal government. So would you see this as just being an option so that you could take it off the shelf but not eliminate?
No.
Right.
It's for me, it's merely when I'm presented with, hey, look at this history of lone pines and their significance to
Yeah.
the country and all the rest, and it's, you know, the size of an A3. It'd be better if, to my mind, if there was a comparable or equivalent city plaque that we could offer that tells the same story, perhaps more succinctly, as an alternative, and that's the city's default option for signs that talk only to the history of the lone pines. But of course, if we're weaving in a family story, I wouldn't imagine that that's trapped by this motion at all. But Councillor Gates, I'm happy to take feedback or to be told that this is a fool's errand. I'm happy for it.
No. I just express a little concern that it may lead the way to requests for other plaques that we have previously not considered putting in our parks and on city infrastructure within parkland.
Yeah, and look, so, I totally take it on point, like memorials, for example. If so, and I've had those pressures in my own parks where tragedy has unfolded. I suppose one of the things that we have done this term of council is to support the availability of lone pines, and in our nursery we have 150 of them. So as a consequence of that decision, so to my mind, if we're going to have these lone pines that we support their planting and we've procured for the installation in public spaces, this is the complementary little bit of tidying up that program.
I will support it.
Yeah. Councillor Tozer? Yeah. All right. Director?
Specify the signs or when it's for remembrance rather than every tree getting a plaque type thing. Like, do you want to be more specific?
Alongside lone pines planted in city open spaces and reserves. So let's, instead of saying planted, let's say dedicated.
Yeah, it might narrow it.
That way. So it's not every vote. So if there's been a formal dedication. Yep. Next director. All right, councillors, unless there are speakers against, I'll put that to a vote. All those in favour? All those against? That is carried. All right, Director, have you received a copy of the Mayor's?
Oh, the mayor's one?
Yep.
Strategy?
So we'll deal with the Mayor's. This is to do with the sports
Oh, no,
academy.
it's next time now.
Oh, it's next time. It's been kicked. Okay. Last one. We need to mop up a glaring a glaring omission in our corporate plan, which identifies the need to look after people but has no related strategy. So, general business item reads as follows: that Council acknowledges there is a gap in our current strategic framework to deliver the people theme of the city's corporate plan, i.e. lifestyle strategy. The Council acknowledges the rapidly changing environment impacting our community and the resulting need to provide strategic direction on how to protect the Gold Coast lifestyle into the future. The Council note that livable communities are a core concept of the Queensland State Planning Policy, and planning and designing for livable communities offers benefits to residences, businesses, workers, etc. 4, that the Lifestyle and Community Directorate undertake a feasibility study and that new funding of $150,000 is included in the draft budget to commence development of the lifestyle strategy for further council consideration. Well, it is under threat. We need to guard against it. But what's that? Protecting our lifestyle. I'm happy to move that, and if there is a seconder, we have an opportunity to talk to it and debate it. Otherwise, it'll lapse. No, it's uncomfortable. It's yeah, sure thing. Great. So thank you, Councillor Lacastra. What has interested me in this role is that the question of infrastructure and the question of infrastructure primarily is how this thought began percolating in my mind is something that we readily apply to things like stormwater. We dealt with that today in T&I. Our road network. It applies to public transport. When we talk infrastructure, we usually talk about every other trunk network other than our community trunk network, right? And to my mind, that we do that at our peril. And we do it at our peril because our corporate plan, which we have developed and reviewed, identifies a big theme. We've got people, place, and prosperity. We take care of place and we take care of prosperity by doing the transport work, by doing the economic development work, by doing the planning work. But as an organisation, what we've never done is to develop the people strategy that would have to fall out of our corporate plan if we're to fulfill it. Because we don't have a strategy, what we're doing is we're reacting ad hoc to growth pressures. We're reacting ad hoc to investment decisions about pool expansions, for example, rather than setting out an agenda for the sorts of investments that we need to make, the sort of services we need to deliver in order to answer the people part of our corporate plan. Now, we don't need to do this. We don't need to do it. And the director will probably, I'll probably make a skin crawl when I say it. We don't need to do it, but we ought to do it because our corporate plan says that there are 3 themes that are important to the Gold Coast community, that are important to the work of the council, or should be, and presently, for historic reasons, we do not deal with our community and our lifestyle from a strategic point of view. And I think it's quite sensible for us to look at whether this is feasible rather than endorse complete delivery, but we can only do that if we have a look at the gaps in our corporate plan, have a look at the gaps in our LGIP, have a look at the gaps in our public toilet program, whatever it is. We need to do the work of feasibility over the next 12 months to understand what the gaps are, because if we don't have an understanding of what the gaps are, we won't know whether we need a strategy, and if we need a strategy, we ought to do it because the corporate plan compels us to do it in the same way it compels us to do things like deliver a transport strategy, a solid waste strategy, and I could go on. That's my pitch. We don't need to do it, but if we're serious about our corporate plan, it's time we do it. Councillor Gates.
Chairman, I think that it goes without saying our corporate plan is about people, and our whole service, our whole city structure is about serving the people that live within the Gold Coast. So I think just don't see how this will align with all of our other strategies and how you will make it align in terms of the planning and the regulation that we must comply with through our city plan, which falls underneath the SEQ plan. And I really can't understand why this needs to be done, because every decision we make is about the people that live in this city, about service to them.
Councillor Gates, and before I hand to the Director to provide some extra context, this is not an exercise in duplicating anything that any other existing strategy deals with. It's not competition to a planning scheme. It's not a competition to a draft solid waste strategy. It's not competition to, I don't know what other recent strategy have we adopted, but no doubt we have one. It's not competition. What it is delivering a strategy that does not presently exist, because we have not, at least to my understanding, and I know you've been here longer, we do not have a holistic view on the sorts of services that we need to be delivering through particular physical locations to address the livability question. We don't have that. Instead, to my mind, what we have are ad hoc projects that come up. Let's take the PCYC that was formerly in my patch, for example. Ad hoc projects that come up without any guidance.
Okay, so if I could just interrupt at that point, about 10 or maybe 12 years ago, there was a plan that was proposed by Community Services. It was all scaled out on a big A3 document, and I still have a copy in my office, which highlighted all of the social infrastructure and the years at which it was proposed it might be delivered. Councillors, in the conduct of their role, have had support from their colleagues to bring forward projects at their own discretion. I mean, the Pacific Pines Community Centre was one that the former councillor Gilmore just plucked out of nowhere and put it forward. It had never been on a forward planning list. But in supporting our colleagues, she committed divisional funding, and I agree from that perspective, the whole of city costs associated with putting a project in that has not been anticipated are never taken into account. I think it came from a general business item. So, projects like that, I agree, need more investigation. But I don't think that this, it's not a competition that I'm looking at between developing a people plan. It's making sure that the ideals can be met, and I don't know that they can be.
So, Deputy Mayor, let me provide some further clarity. To my understanding, we've got a corporate plan. Out of a corporate plan falls our strategies. Out of our strategies fall our plans. So we have motherhood statement, and then we've got action on the ground as we fall from the top down to the bottom. Presently, my feeling is that we have a number of plans. For example, our Accessible and Inclusiveness Action Plan, which is a plan that exists as an orphan. It was sorry? Why is it? Because it does not belong to a strategy in the same way that our active transport plan belongs to our transport strategy, belongs to our corporate plan. So it's an orphan in the sense that there is no strategy which said that this was an important bit of work to do. Sorry, Councillor Gates. So it's an orphan because it does not fall out of a strategy. It was done and recommended as a meritorious bit of work to do because city officers identified that there was an urgent need to address.
Isn't there a provision in the corporate plan in the A4 that talks about under the people arm, talks about pre-emphasis?
Yeah, but if we subscribe to that logic, we wouldn't need a transport strategy. We would simply have a green bridge plan. So what the strategy does is it prioritises the plans that need to be carried out in order to achieve the objectives of the corporate plan. So for example, we've got a culture strategy. Okay, do we need a culture strategy? Maybe the culture strategy is the lifestyle strategy, and that we have plans like the live music action plan that can then fall out. I'm just presenting you an opportunity to deal with issues like accessibility, disability, culture, music, libraries, all that sort of stuff that we're already doing. I'm just providing you an opportunity to provide some order to it so that we can prioritise the things that we want in and out. And to my way of thinking, deal with social infrastructure in the same way we deal with built infrastructure. Now, these are my two thoughts. Councillor Castro has been gracious enough to second my motion. If there's no support for it, that's fine. I'm very comfortable with that. But my view is that if we have a corporate plan and the community tells us through the consultation process on the corporate plan that these things are important, we need to make sure that we're dealing equitably across all of those networks.
Can I ask some questions?
Yeah, I'll go to Councillor Hamill and then Councillor Tozer.
Mr. Chair, I'm wondering, with the corporate plan, if there was a part of that plan that we weren't on track to deliver, that normally gets picked up through the risk committee or something like that, through one of those audit processes, that it would have been a letter there. So is this how we came to this, that a separate committee or a separate group's detected that we're not on track to complete a part of the corporate plan?
No, as I explained, serving in my capacity as the chair of the committee, have seen lots of agenda items come up, had lots of conversations with city officers, and I formed the view that we weren't strategically looking at social infrastructure.
So we dibble dabble in it, but you're looking for something a little bit more concrete in terms of a plan
It's
to
all
it.
ad hoc.
Yeah.
There's no 10,000 foot view to say that here are the pressures, here are the opportunities, and through this feasibility process, let's look at rationalising what we already have, getting rid of what's old and doesn't work, and plugging the gap. So the culture strategy for me is a good place to start, because we now have an outdoor stage, we now have a gallery, we now have city events living in a different place. I'm not sure if the current culture strategy is for purpose, but that's something that we can pick up in a review, right? Councillor Hamill.
Mr. Chair, just to pick up on one point you raised, that it is something that we're touching on from time to time from different areas. So I was wondering, maybe with you to the director, is this, you're obviously saying that you don't have the existing resources to be able to do this from your current budget, that it needs a new position and a new budget to do this?
So through the chair, yes, that's right. So I think, we're the only director that doesn't have this overarching strategy. It's absolutely essential in my mind as well that we have this. So we know we've got a community that's changing. We need to look at our changing community, look at the profile, disability, ageing, youth, all the different needs of our community, and make sure that A, the community knows where we're heading as a directorate, but B, to understand exactly what does our community look like in the future and what do we want to provide. And exactly what Councillor Gates was saying, we don't want that to be a GB where we actually don't have a strategy. We want to be able to say to everybody, let's stick to the strategy that we've got. And the other question I get all the time is, do we need a big regional centre? Do we need a pop-up centre? Do we need a vending machine or a library? Like, what do we need? This sort of strategy would map that out, and we all agree this is where we're heading for the future. So this is a big gap for us, and we need that direction, we need that strategy, we need to hang. And as Councillor Vorster said, like the ACAP, the Access and Inclusion Plan, we end up doing that because we should have come out of the strategy. The strategy should have said we're going to make the city more accessible, and these are the standards we're setting for ourselves, or this is the direction we're heading in. And the ACAP would have come out of that. We were so desperate to do the ACAP, we went ahead and did it. But ideally, that's what that plan should have taken us in the direction it should have, it's absolutely a big gap for us, and absolutely needs to show us where we're going, what standards we want to set, and what the gaps are for our future.
One last question, if I can, Mr. Chair.
Yeah,
just to check. So,
sorry, Councillor.
Apologies.
Before we get to a second question, just on that, I just want to ask a follow-up question that's occurred to me. I know when I speak with Director Twine, for example, that there's strong alignment in that directorate between the work that's been carried out and the transport strategy.
Absolutely.
Can you talk to, if there are risks, and maybe there are not, but just how a strategy might provide guidance to your own team, and how big that team is?
So through the chair, so that strategy will also tell us what we're not going to do, what is not the direction of this council and what we're not going to provide. So there is actually no resource to do this strategy, which is why it's so important for us to spell this out. It is something that obviously we can, that we want in the budget this year, because we feel like this should have happened many, many years ago. And it actually provides us direction in terms of where we're heading as a council to set that standard, but also allows the community to advocate for things that they want as well, because they know that aligns with our strategy.
So to get to your question, I just want to flag another reactive thing we had to deal with was the issue of homelessness. Now, are we in that space? Are we not in that space? Is it primarily advocacy, or is it service provision? I mean, if we had a strategy that set out our role in this city, in this sphere, to my mind, we could have either dealt with it before it got too bad, or we could have had clarity about council's position. But it's another example of where a policy had to be dealt with reactively rather than with the clarity of objective assessment. Councillor Hamill, then Councillor Gates. Councillor Hamill to finish, his questions. Councillor Tozer, Councillor Gates.
Mr. Chair, I'm just wondering in regards to the feasibility study, is that an external consultant that does that kind of work? Not being familiar with this kind of thing at all, but who kind of does that, and what may it look like? What could possibly come back to us? What would it look like?
So through the chair, so it would be an external consultant that would do it for us. They'd look at our scorecard in terms of actually looking at what our population looks like and how the population will look for the future, and they'll help map us out in terms of what we're going to do and where we're going to go in that sense, and give us advice on that.
And sorry, Mr. Chair, any idea if it was successful to get through committee, then get through full council and got through budget process, like a timeline and that kind of study? Like, it seems, the more I think about it, the more things that are thrown up, it seems like a fairly significant piece of work to put together.
Yeah, so through the chair, so we have tried to start this work in the past. So there is a lot of background there that we've already got. So we think that it would take us 6 months.
So that last comment you made there directly sounds to me that this work could help reduce the cost of stuff in the future too, because you wouldn't be doing things halfway again. Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Yeah, and I appreciate that this is a meaty GB to throw up, and I'm under no, I don't expect it to get up. I mean, reading the room, but no. Well, look. I mean, I've the benefit of being able to read faces across from me, and I appreciate that there is consternation. But if I didn't, honestly, I mean, you know what I'm like. You've seen me at committee and during the LGIP workshop and all the rest. If I legitimately did not think that there is a governance risk and value in pursuing this, I wouldn't be putting it up. I'm happy to lose the vote. I'm absolutely happy to lose the vote. But I appreciate having the debate at least. Councillor Tozer.
My first question relates to the origin of this. Is your identifying, this is not, because you prefaced this item by saying it was the mayor's?
No, the mayor's related to
It's a different one.
it's like some sports training academy that he wanted to support financially.
Okay, cool.
Ahead
No
of the
problem.
games.
So this isn't new. Yeah, I just want to make, because it was prefaced with that commentary. Yeah, this is just
nothing to do.
And so I'm relatively familiar with the corporate plan, but I'm just re-familiarising myself with it now. It talks about 3.1 to 3.6. Our city is safe. We're proud of our city. Our community is inclusive and supportive. Our city embraces culture every day. Our city provides a wide range of job opportunities, and we're an active and healthy community. They're the 6 elements of our current people arm.
Yes.
And it occurs to me that this idea of a lifestyle strategy is primarily
The people.
the people arm,
Yes.
but each of those items has either what I can recall as a fairly strict action plan already, or a strategy in place. In the city is safe. We have elements of what we already do that relate to keeping our city safe. Our pride is done by Corp Comms through that rep track work, that internal and external perceptions of the city. The inclusive and sporties is done by the accessible and inclusive city action plan. The cultural strategy is covered by the embracing culture every day. The wide range of job opportunities is covered by the economic development strategy. And the active and healthy community is probably, I would suggest it's probably covered by the active and healthy program. So I'm trying to work out exactly what are we trying to achieve in this strategy that is not already encompassed in one of those 6 people the people pillar. So,
Okay, let's speak frankly. I'm going to ask a question of the director. How many officers do we have? This is just, sorry, I apologise for putting you on the spot.
okay.
How many officers do we have that deal with the multicultural economies? How many multicultural communities, right?
Yep.
How
So
many
we have-
FTEs?
So we have half a position, and I think most of the councils have about 5 to 7.
Okay, so we've got half a position. Now, I know that, because I hear it all the time, 28% of Gold Coasters are born overseas.
right.
Okay? 28%. When you include a parent, it goes out past 54, and we've got half a position. Now, there may be plans and there may be strategies and there might be there may be plans and there may be programs and there may be initiatives and there may be partnerships, but it doesn't mean that we are properly looking at our community's needs and prioritising how we respond to those needs. And it's not a question of throwing more money at the problem. It's a question of, are we allocating the resources that we do have in a way that meets community needs and community expectations? So this doesn't even presume that we need a lifestyle strategy. What it's asking for is the money to identify whether we need one, to answer your very question. And the reason why we need to ask that question is that if we rely on the corporate plan and those 6 items you referred to, and it says, oh, we're accessible and inclusiveness, it may be tempting to say job done. But in the case of the multicultural element that I referred to, I'm not comfortable saying it's job done.
No, I get that.
An FTE.
Yeah, I mean, and I hear what you're saying. I actually think this is a resourcing issue. I think we actually have identified shortcomings in our resourcing, particularly labour resourcing, for activities with the Community Services Department. And we actually know where those gaps are, where those shortfalls are.
I don't.
And for us to spend $150,000 on a feasibility study for a lifestyle strategy, I think would be better spent on us actually assessing and determining very clearly where there are gaps and actually resourcing those gaps so we can actually deliver better services to our residents.
I think the real risk with that is it risks throwing more money at the way that we presently go about doing business and according to the priorities that we've established ourselves, without doing a deep dive into what the community need actually is, particularly at this moment.
Okay.
So
I mean, you've answered my question.
So you may personally form that view, but if your we includes all councillors, it certainly doesn't include me.
So I don't know what you mean by that.
So when you say that we have done this, we have done that, I just want to make it clear that...
You can be very clear that when I speak, I'm only speaking for myself.
Okay.
That when I ask a question, it's for myself, and I'm only speaking for myself when I'm speaking.
Yeah, okay. As long as we're all clear. And again, your view might be the same as everyone opposite. I just want to make it clear that it's not mine.
I can neither confirm nor deny whether my view is the same, but you can assume when you're speaking to me and I'm asking you a question that my view is only mine.
Okay. Councillor O'Neill. Oh, sorry, Councillor Gates. O'Neill, then Lacastre.
I think Brooke was before.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, wait. Councillor.
It's okay. It's kind of a little while ago. But I like the idea, and I kind of got the impression from the director that when Councillor Tozer was saying that we know and we can allocate it, that's not your experience. That's not what you think. You don't think we know right now.
So through the chair, absolutely don't think we know right now.
Yeah. So I would imagine that people is got to be pretty fundamental to what we do, and I'm supportive, but I don't have a vote, so I'll leave it.
Sorry, Councillor Gates.
Historically, we've relied on community services to bring their branches, and there's many, together to give us the information and the leadership. And like I said, about 10 years ago, we had a whole social infrastructure plan which clearly set out the needs. And Mr. Jacobs, is he here today? He was instrumental in doing much of the research about population growth and providing all of the information we needed to make the decisions that we've made in terms of providing the Upper Coomera Centre, the Ormo Centre, all of the infrastructure that's been delivered in Northern Gold Coast to catch up and give them a comparable level of service as existed in the parts of the city that were established so much earlier. I would be comfortable on asking for a report which outlined what the director's speaking of. I'm not comfortable in allocating $150,000 today into the draft budget. I think the mayor's, I would prefer that this issue be referred to full council for discussion and for the mayor to have input into how he would like to see this progress. I just don't believe there's a gap in our corporate plan. It's been an award-winning corporate plan over and over, and I don't believe there's a gap. I think what we do is about people. Every step of the way it's about people. So because there's not a little box that everything falls from, I don't think that's the important thing. I tend to agree with Councillor Tozer. I would rather put some funding into additional resources if you're short, and give the managers a task of bringing together their vision for what they believe might be necessary. And if we haven't got the people to do that, I see at this point in time, I would have hoped that through your leadership team, those people would already exist to give us guidance.
The managers, many of whom are here, demonstrate phenomenal leadership. I've had dealings with, as you have, with all of them. And I know that they absolutely make every effort to work with us as community representatives and to discern as objectively as possible what the needs are on the ground. My sense is that it's not working, and it's not working because of any fault on their part whatsoever. It's not working, to my mind, because we haven't taken the opportunity as elected representatives to put the issue of livability and people and community at the same level as building a road, upgrading a roundabout, or building a swimming pool. Sorry, Councillor Tozer, I don't recall interrupting you. I feel as though when we set a strategy, what we do as a council is to provide reliable direction for our managers and all of their staff to pull in the same direction, rather than attempting individually and within business teams to reconcile what they believe may be the disposition of the council with the needs of the community as they're presented to them because of complaint or as issue emerges. The homelessness issue, well and truly, I think illustrates the point. We didn't have a defined approach to dealing with the issue of homelessness in the city. We did not have it. So it wasn't a question of resourcing. It was a question we didn't know what our involvement was and what we should be doing in the space. And that's what the strategy, in my view, attempts to distill. What are the ingredients for a livable city? What are the ingredients for a lifestyle that is attractive to people? What are all of those ingredients? And then to what extent does council have a role to play? And if that means service delivery, what does that look like? What does that mean? If it is infrastructure, what does that look like? But as far as infrastructure is concerned, all the strategy would merely point to is help inform our understanding of what a good desired service standard should be. And it will be for planning, and it will be for other directorates to enliven these things. In the same way, absurdly, that transport and infrastructure are involved in the delivery of the council cab service, which is about assisting more senior members of our community to access medical appointments and go shopping. You see, there is always cross-directorate play. Anyway, I'm happy for this to be lost today because for me, it's a conversation that needs to be had, and either the view is business as usual is fine, or the view is that we can and should elevate community, but at least let's make the decision so that officers know what their role is. It's either to align with the strategy that we decide or to work as best as possible to respond to the need according to the way that they presently do business. Councillor Owen-Jones.
So clearly I don't have a vote here, so, but if I could just have, I actually don't think it needs to be lost today. To me, it's a little bit out of the box. It hasn't necessarily been discussed. And I think that the 5 should be tweaked and modified to basically package it off to a special budget committee for a further discussion and ultimately give the director an opportunity to advocate why she thinks it may very well be important to help tie everything together. I suppose we had a meeting this morning where it was discussed about it being the end of the world of Palm Beach because public transport was being delivered, and that's me saying that in shorthand. And you said the opposite to that, in fact, that we're building a city when we actually start delivering things. And likewise, in regards to some of the emotive wording around protecting our lifestyle and all of that, and I know you love it,
No, I didn't say
but what's that? How to protect the Gold Coast lifestyle.
Yeah, no, I think Councillor Toten was the one.
But to me, it's like we actually live in a great city. You know, when we do these strategy documents, it's about us defining what is our responsibility in regards to funding stuff and what isn't our responsibility. So I would be supportive of this if it didn't actually read ultimately like a horoscope, that you could read anything into it and it was actually really clear as to what we're not responsible for, because I think that's the rabbit hole we forever fall down. So we whether or not it's policing or hooning or homelessness, a whole heap of responsibilities that aren't necessarily ours. So if this spending $150,000 helps define what we're actually not responsible for, I could see the need to support it. Right. But I can't support it. I wouldn't support a document that ended up being able to be read whatever you want into it. And we've got a transport strategy where people can read a whole lot of stuff into it, and suddenly you end up with some massive projects that just kind of turn up because they might have been mentioned on page 73, you know, as a one-liner, and a whole story gets built around that. So I know that I've gone in a random walk, but I think you need to tweak 5, you know, and it's about what we aren't going to deliver because we only get 3% of the funding pile and our state and federal guys get everything else.
Right. I'm happy to delete 3, but I'll just say this in response. Our vision statement in our corporate plan is.
Well, if you're going to say it, you need to say it.
No, I'm happy to say it.
We'll say it.
I'm also happy for everyone to. Right, inspired by lifestyle, driven by opportunity. I mean, our whole corporate plan, the first 3 words are inspired by lifestyle. So I'm not trying to create something out of nothing. I really want to make the very clear point that our corporate plan is about lifestyle, and yet we don't have a lifestyle strategy. To the extent that our vision statement is lifestyle, I think we need to be in the space. Do we need to be in policing? No. But anyway, I'm happy to remove 3 if Councillor Lakash, you've seconded it for the purposes of debate. Are you happy for 3 to go?
I wanted to actually, I wanted to come back to where William was going with 5 more. So, but yes, I'm happy for 3 to go.
If 3 can go.
Happy for 3 to go. My questions were really around the funding, because it sounds to me as if there is, and from listening to the director as well, that there's a lot of work that needs to be done, and if we're going to go down this track, and I can't see how 150 grand is even going to cut it in the first instance. And so I think we need to get a pretty clear understanding of what this is really going to cost, because I'm worried that it's going to come back and it's going to be a lot more than 150, especially if it's 6 months work. You don't get a lot for 150 grand when you go out to consultants, but I don't know. Where did this figure come from? That was my question.
Director?
So through the chair, so as I was saying before, there's a lot of work that's been done in this space. So this is really someone pulling all of that together, looking at the latest data and actually writing the strategy for us. But we can bring back a report and give people more detail, and we can, talk about this at another time if people want to talk individually to me. But I think, there's a lot more detail that we can outline for you as well.
All right, so how about that a report be brought forward outlining the merit of undertaking a feasibility study for a lifestyle strategy?
The cost, I guess, as to, I mean, is this, you really think this 150 will cover it?
Yeah. So,
Okay.
so Councillor Castro, we'll end up with your consent, which is this condensation of everything, that a report be brought forward outlining the merit of undertaking a feasibility study for a lifestyle strategy, and then 1 and 4 can go. Councillor Owen Jones?
And did you want to give us a time for that?
No.
So,
No, because I don't think we'll have the window, not as the mover of the motion. I don't think that there's the buy-in to deal with this in any other way than baby step by baby step. And I'd rather the director take on board a lot of the feedback that's been had to get a better sense of how long it might take in order to answer some of these early questions to the satisfaction of the committee. Councillor O'Neill.
Thanks, Chair. Look, since I've been a councillor, I have to say, when I first got into council, I was terribly impressed with the services that the city, offer to its residents, above and beyond roads, rates and rubbish, all that stuff. Honestly, some of the programs that are offered don't get offered in other councils, and that's quite evident. I do accept the fact that there's a lot of ad hoc stuff going on, and I do understand that you want to pull it together, but that I would have thought that would come from the director in a report. So I'm really happy that we're changing that, because I think that's the way to go. I think we are in a lot of space where we shouldn't be, and homelessness is one of them that's been forced on us, and we're in there and we have to accept it. And it's fantastic, I think, the steps we've taken to date, and that could be part of what forms part of the strategy. But I think to date it's been very impressive. I think what's unimpressive is that we, as much as Corp Comms and we have all these programs that we put out there, it's not recognised enough by the residents how much is done above and beyond all the basic stuff. And I think it's pretty impressive. So if having a strategy brings that out, even if that's all that it happens, that it does bring that out and people know what's happening in the city for them, I think that's a really good idea. But I think I'm really, really glad that they've changed because I couldn't support it as it was, I'm afraid, Chair, because I really think we need to really see the details of what exactly is going to take part. Thank you.
And sorry, I heard some murmurings about protecting our lifestyle as if this was some kind of election-inspired trope. But just to make a point, we've got a transport strategy, and the current version of the transport strategy on page 41, which is just after the mayor's forward. So this now deals with the officer parlance. In paragraph 2, it says here, getting transport right is essential to protecting our Gold Coast lifestyle. Third paragraph ends by saying, increasing walking, cycling, public transport will help manage traffic congestion and protect our lifestyle. the reason why we're talking about lifestyle is because the corporate plan talks about lifestyle. Our committee is called the Lifestyle and Community Committee, and the directorate is the Lifestyle and Community Committee. So there's no funny election slogan business going on here, because that was raised repeatedly. It's actually core business of council, and I think it's an obvious place to start by naming a strategy, or aligning the name of a strategy with the name of a directorate. Councillor Belden.
Thanks, Chair. I think it's important to protect our lifestyle as well. Most of the points you'd raised, I think, are what we're here for. People want to live on the coast because of our lifestyle. But is this the motion as it stands now that you're proposing?
Yep.
Okay. Because initially I was questioning what we would get for 150,000, but then I guess my question now is, for a lifestyle strategy, we end up with a lifestyle strategy. What changes in terms of the operation of the council?
We don't end up with a lifestyle strategy.
So this is, a feasibility study, but I mean, it's determined it's feasible. We want to make a lifestyle strategy. We then decide to fund and create a lifestyle strategy. What changes in the operation of the council when we have a lifestyle strategy? What are we hoping this long-term vision will achieve?
So our long-term vision is our corporate plan.
Yes.
So what we hope to achieve is captured there. Our strategy then talks to how are we going to achieve these aspirational targets? How are we going to do it? The strategy will tell us what our areas of focus need to be, and as our areas of focus slip from high priority to low priority, then we have clarity around whether it's core business for us, or rather an partnership and then advocacy spectrum. What a strategy will also do, once we've decided for the directorate as the elected representatives what the priorities are, is we then give the administration the opportunity of realigning their branches or their priorities or what have you, realigning them to deliver on our vision to meet our community expectation. For example, animal management for me is like our approach to local law.
Constant, yeah.
Right, is of a concern to me, right? Because if you're not enforcing the rules that we have, then we cause all sorts of amenity issues, and amenity issues become lifestyle issues. So a strategy may have impacts on the way we handle those enforcement things, right? The way we resource our officers, the lobbying for legislative change so that we can compel, dog walkers to identify themselves if their dogs have, been involved in an attack. All those sorts of things will fall out operationally by deciding on what the priorities are, which we'll have clarity once we look at have a strategy.
I guess that's just the part that I'm still missing. So the long-term vision for the city is the corporate plan, which is stepped out, and that's the key points we want to deliver as a city. Yep. That's why I'm, I guess, not understanding what a strategy achieves, in the sense we're still elected to represent community in the city, and the officers, most of the issues you were raising, I thought was still the day-to-day operation of council, and I thought those things should be happening with or without.
So as a council and as councillors, we are legislatively obliged, and Councillor Owen Jones will correct me if I'm wrong, to deliver a corporate plan. Okay, so it's our job to deliver a corporate plan for the organisation, and it's our job to set an organisational structure to help deliver that corporate plan. But a corporate plan deals in very broad brushstrokes, right, about our vision for the city and the sorts of things that we want to provide. It helps articulate what our community's expectations are. Our work as elected officials then continue, because then we need to translate the corporate plan into action on the ground. And the way we do that is by then deciding within our financial limits what our priorities are, right? And that gets talked about in our strategies, and then how we resource the delivery of plans, which are the things that are on the ground. Now, of course, we've got our annual plan and we've got our budget process that sit as a parallel process to help those things tick along. But I'm not sure if I've answered your question, but how does we have an impact on operations to the extent that we, through this process, decide what the priorities are and what the services need to be.
Yes. So maybe, sorry, through you, Chair, maybe to the director then. So $150,000 and 6 months have passed and there's a lifestyle strategy. How will this better support the officers in enacting their duties?
So through the chair, so it is around prioritisation. So it's prioritisation direction. So whilst the corporate plan is good, I don't disagree with it at all. But what this will do is step this out for us in terms of the direction we're heading. So if the corporate plan talks about safety, then the plan that will actually really map out and bring things in there. So when we think of safety, we think of our SEPTED assessments. We think of our cameras, but it's also things like our local laws, and really starts to flesh out what the direction is and what the priorities are for the city. The corporate plan doesn't do that. It gives us that high level direction, absolutely, but this actually puts in the actions and the plans for us to get to a certain goal that we'll set ourselves, but also talks about what we won't do and what business we're not going to get into, so that it isn't the GB that comes up. So, community services and community centres, absolutely, we do have those mapped out and that's part of the plan. But in terms of what they look like, what they're going to provide and where our priorities lie within some of that service delivery, we don't have that detail yet.
Yeah. So like, for example, let's take another policy thing that we've had to deal with in Mudgeeraba and in Palm Beach with the libraries, for example. We've had to confront a change in the need in our community for more flexible spaces. And in those communities, it made sense to deliver traditional library services in different ways. But it's almost been done as an ad hoc response in Mudgeeraba, in Palm Beach. Well, okay, the council, let's take Mudgeeraba off the table if the councils aren't convinced by what I'm saying. But nonetheless, there hasn't been a strategy or plan that's helped guide how we need to offer different services in the same places or in different places to meet changes in community need. And a strategy will allow the officers to concentrate on those services that we think are most important through the development of a strategy to get that service delivery correct. Councillor Gates.
Thanks, Chair. I just wanted to make it clear that when I mentioned the delivery of Northern infrastructure, I was actually commending the council staff for their job in firstly agreeing that there was a great need, and then for the magnificent job that they did over the last 8 years to make sure it was delivered and to provide further resourcing for the future. I think, however, I'm worried about 15 of us having a different view about what's a priority, to be perfectly honest, that I don't want to see set in stone in a strategy. I think each of us as elected representatives may in fact be the first people to become aware of a change in community and to bring it to the attention of our colleagues who may not be quite so au fait with the various areas of our city. And I think it's through strong representation and debate that most times we get it right and we support each other where we recognise on the information that's brought before us the need. I just can't see that we need another strategy that guides what's already being successfully delivered, in my view, on most occasions. And the point that I make about the ad hoc things that come forward, that we put our hands up in the air to support our colleagues, maybe we have to be a little more discerning and always seek guidance from... No, we already have a very successful team of managers in lifestyle and communities. It's the core service provider for the ratepayers of this city in every way. And I think we have the most incredible library services. We have incredible services through Active and Healthy and through, you know, all the community safety forum that the mayor's put in place, the camera network that's evolved. I don't see where the problem is with the department or the branch at the moment. I think it's working very well, and I... Go ahead.
So, no, sorry, I thought you'd finished.
No. So I'm happy to support getting a feasibility study that will tell me where the problems are that we need to address. But I think we perhaps have stepped into areas where we've previously hoped not to experience cost shifting. I don't know that we need a strategy. It's common sense, really, where that cost shifting occurs, and it's up to us as representatives to have the courage to vote how we know in our hearts we should vote.
And I'll respond by saying if we hold that we have amazing managers, which we do, and that we rely on the council of our managers to provide us with advice. If we do that, I'm interested in the answer to this question. Director, when you have spoken to your management team about the potential to have a lifestyle strategy, have they recognised a need for it to support their work?
So I think it's yes on both accounts. I think there's absolutely some good work going on at the moment, but they are absolutely crying out for that future plan. And so they all have asked for this plan, and we've been asking for it for a long time internally. And so this is the first time we've brought it to council.
Yeah, so thanks for answering that. And I think while I have, as Councillor Gates used the word courage, while I've had the courage to bring this important discussion to committee, because I believe it's a discussion that needs to be had, even though it may not have the support of the council. I do it knowing that city officers rely on direction from us. And today at TNI, there was a discussion, I'm not sure if you were there, Councillor Gates, but it dealt with autonomous shuttles, and the officers relied on the direction that we were able to provide. And my understanding, having spoken with some managers, is that they're asking for this too. And if they're asking for it, and I see a need for it, I think it's worth considering. Councillor Patterson.
At the start of this conversation, I was finding it hard to grapple with how does this look practically. I now kind of get it. And for example, so to Councillor Gates, we are allocating a substantial amount of money to a revitalisation project in the CBD. It'll be kind of like entertainment, all of that to get people back in. Now, from my perspective of my community knowledge and connection and knowing all the retired people there who are speaking with me, I'm thinking, okay, we need to make sure that we're targeting that retired group. And also I speak to so many parents like myself who go like, well, where do we go out for dinner and people that don't go into the CBD? How do we contact that? What council have proposed to me is they said, no, actually, you know what? We propose we actually go quite grunge and we're targeting 18 to 28-year-olds. Now, I'm guessing that they've got more information to guide them on that than me, but what I think is something that's potentially missing in this is, and I would want to make sure that the strategy is really focusing on community research rather than necessarily community consultation. Yeah. So it's research, it's evidence-based stuff. We're spending some serious money there. If it was done by me, I would be targeting a completely different segment of the market and may completely miss it. So I really see a lot of value in this. I don't know what the stats quite are, but in my electorate of 20-something thousand people, it changes over by 1,200 people a year or something. The demographics are consistently changing, so what we think we may have known about our community is also changing. So any research trends on that will inform how we act in the future. I think if there's 150 grand who can really identify, look, this is who you need to target, this is this is who your population is, this is what is coming, this is what the shortfalls are. It could have been that, for example, this one small 3-month Southport strategy, which is going to be more than 150 grand, would have completely gone to the wrong demographic. And I do think as well that this is actually very helpful on that thing of working out where we don't get into it. Yep. So on the homelessness, we're still working out where do we get in, where do we not get in, how do we have the power to push back against the state government because we've identified those issues. What this homelessness strategy, one of the best things it's done for us is it's made it really, really tight and clear so that our officers can really push back and advocate and demand to the state. So I suppose you could say I'm a supporter of the idea. Thank you.
Councillor Jones and then Councillor Gates. No? Councillor Gates? Sure.
Chairman, to the Director, has this, it's not come before us before, but has it been discussed at ELT previously?
Through the Chair, yes it has. So, but it's been discussed in relation to our social scorecard, so looking at our data for the future, so our ageing population, homelessness, domestic violence, disability, those sorts of things. It's just been discussed in relation to that, but not a paper.
So not in relation to a shortfall in the corporate plan?
Through the Chair, yes, absolutely. Through a shortfall, it's been identified as a gap, absolutely. But we're looking at the best timing in terms of post-Commonwealth Games, because we've been talking about it probably for 4 years, but post-Commonwealth Games and, post a lot of the other strategies that were going into place, we saw this was a gap and we looked at the timing of when's the best to do it.
Okay, thank you.
Another, now that you say Commonwealth Games, another example where we had an ad hoc project come up was the volunteering legacy work, which is great. I love it, and I love speaking at it and engaging with community groups and what have you, but it's a whole program of work that doesn't have a home. And, I got Brooke there going, yeah, absolutely. It is a good program. But yeah, it doesn't have a home, and we've endorsed a plan, but we've really never tested it against our strategy for how we need to be engaging with our community groups. I mean, I can't get a community group to have a regular booking, and sorry, libraries, sorry, Melinda, but I can't get a community group like the Lions to get a space in my library to meet without them having to do a booking and pay X amount of dollars and all that sort of stuff. For me, a strategy is a strategy doesn't, but a strategy is the home for our plans, and those plans get reviewed from time to time, right?
Okay.
So anyway,
we're going to get a study.
I reckon you've nailed it with your recommendation.
I think you've nailed it, and I think it will get nailed at some point. But
well, it's not. It just that's
simple.
first step, second step, and then it'll get done.
That's a good line. Yeah. It's a good motion.
I'll put that to a vote. All those in favour? All those against? That's carried. Councillors, any other further items? Any other further general business items? No, I'd just like to thank the managers for being here today. Thank you.
Brooke's our favourite manager.